Maundy Thursday is Jesus' last chance with his disciples, his last chance to sit with them and to try to get through to their hearts. You know, we think of Jesus teaching in parables. A sower went out to sow. We think of Jesus teaching the Sermon on the Mount, but a lot of times when he's teaching his disciples too, he's saying, not like this, stop that, but do this instead. And there is, you know, the Pharisees had their things and Jesus had his issues with them, but the disciples had their issues too. And Jesus is constantly trying to keep them on track, and this theme keeps coming up in the ministry of Jesus. It comes up again at the Last Supper. From early in Jesus' ministry in Luke 9, an argument started amongst the disciples as to which of them would be the greatest. A bunch of fishermen. Which of us is going to be the greatest? Jesus, knowing their thoughts, took a child, had him stand beside him. Whoever welcomes this child in my name welcomes me. Whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. It's the one who's the least among you who's the greatest. Isn't that a real challenge for our humanness to prefer someone else instead of us, to honor another person instead of ourselves? Master, said John, we saw someone driving out demons in your name. We tried to stop him. He's not one of us. We're the disciples. They're not. They're bad. They're not like us. They're not in our group. Don't stop him, Jesus said. Whoever is not against you is for you. The time approached for him to be taken to heaven. Jesus set for Jerusalem. He sent messengers ahead who went to the Samaritan village to get things ready for him. The people did not welcome him because he was headed for Jerusalem. When the disciples James and John saw this, they asked, Lord, do you want us to call fire from heaven to destroy them? Because we're good and they're not. Because we're right and they're wrong. Because we're the disciples and they're obviously rude Samaritans. Jesus turned and rebuked them, and then they went on to another village. From the Luke passage of the Last Supper, again, here it is again. A dispute arose among them as to which of them was to be the greatest. Okay. Jesus said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them. Those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. You are not to be like that. I'm sure it felt like a stinging rebuke. You are not to be like that. That's not what the kingdom is like. That's not what I'm teaching people. Just because other people do that's not what we're going to be. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, the one who rules like the one who serves. Who's greater, the one who's at the table or the one who serves? Well, the one who's at the table is greater, right? But Jesus, I have come among you as one who serves. And then from the John passage of the Last Supper, when he'd finished when he'd finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I've done for you? Do you have any idea of the symbolism of what I've done here? I'm showing you how we're to live. This foot washing thing that made you feel uncomfortable, I'm trying to show you how we're supposed to live, how we're supposed to care for one another, how we're supposed to treat one another. You call me teacher and Lord, rightly so, that's what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. What would the rest of our lives look like if every day we sought to serve RD or Linda or Charlie or Kathy? How would the world change if we woke up every day to serve others as Jesus served us? I've set an example that you should do as I have done. Truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master. A messenger is not greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you'll be blessed if you do them. My dad used to say it's not enough to know the right thing to do. You've got to do the right thing. How our world would change, how our world does change as we get our brains off of ourselves and into loving others for the sake of Christ. It is human nature to put myself before you, to worry about my ego and my agenda and my issues. It's human nature to sing the song, "My dog is bigger than your dog." It is our human nature. It is our human nature to focus on division instead of unity. My goodness, do you read the stuff on Facebook? If the news channels aren't bad enough, some of the things that people post. You know, Dave, I'm just posting on your Facebook, and I'm just saying the views you just posted are crazy, and here's why. AB's, it's like we tolerate other in person, but somehow at night when we all get on the internet, we're going to try to straighten each other out. Like in this world, everyone is going to think the way I think? Is that what we think the kingdom is going to be like, that everyone in the world is going to agree with me? Well, I have a picture of the disciples. A few years ago, we did this. We had some tables, and we dressed some people up, and they were the disciples. Do you remember that? And they all had on bathrobes and sheets and things. It's kind of a cute thing that a lot of churches do on Maundy, Thursday, and it gives us this idea that they're all the same. You can just imagine Jesus saying, "Okay, if you all want to be in the picture, get over here on this side of the table," right? The disciples are a very, very different group of folks. One thing they have in common is Jesus collects most of them around the Sea of Galilee, but they're very different folks. There is one group, one large clique of fishermen, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. They all know each other. They all run together. I'm sure the four of them gang up on the other 8 every time they can. They're a little clan. They're a little clique. You have Bartholomew, who's not a fisherman. He's a farmer. Philip, who is a Greek, which means he probably wasn't born there, or his parents weren't born there. It means he's probably a lot more educated than the other disciples. And he certainly doesn't fit in with fishermen. We have Thomas, the negative whiner. Oh boy. If there's 1 in every 100, if there's 2 in every 100, how many are there in a church of 1,000? One of the greatest ministries you can have is go to the people that are unhappy and say, "Everything's okay." Not that you were ever unhappy, but everything's okay. Thomas is that guy, the other 11 are going, "Jesus, this guy? Really?" All he's doing is dragging us down. To add insult to injury, Jesus brings in a tax collector. Do you have any money? He's the guy that every time he sees you, he's wanting some money. He's wanting to make sure you're up to date. He's got his books. They hated him. He worked for Herod, or he worked for the Romans. This is one of the most hated human beings in the community, and Jesus brings him into the inner circle. Oh, what a delightful bunch. Then we have Judas. What more can we say? We have Thaddeus and James the Less, who we know less about, and Simon the Zealot, who I've talked about before. The Zealots was a group that wanted to overthrow Rome by force. So in Jesus' group of inner circle, he brings in someone who has pledged allegiance to the group that wants to kill the Romans and get them out. No wonder they're arguing over who's the greatest. No wonder they're fighting over what it's all about. because they are a mixed bag. They are a tossed salad. And Jesus is trying to teach these people how to affect the world. Isn't it amazing that though they're all so very, very different, he says to each one, you, I see it in you. You have what it takes. Come follow me. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that beautiful? God looks beyond our differences and calls all of us. Well, there's something beautiful about the message of Jesus coming to earth. Because while we're all worried that Charles is not a fisherman, and we are, and you're a farmer and we don't get you, and you want tax money, the arrival of Jesus on this planet is kind of an incredible message, because he takes off all of the clothes that anyone would wear that would call themselves important. In Philippians 2, Paul wrote, "In your relationships with one another, have this mindset that was in Jesus Christ. He was in very nature God, but did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing." Jesus, being very God, peeled all of that off of himself and came to earth. He shed the things that would have caused people to say, "Oh, you're amazing. Oh, you're God. Oh, yes, I'm cool." He peeled those things off. He made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant. Being made in human likeness, being found in the appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death. He was born on this earth as a homeless baby. Next time you're going to be against homeless people, you just remember, Jesus started as a homeless person. He was born into a very poor family. Next time you have something to say about poor people, Jesus has shucked all of the things that we pull to ourselves to cause ourselves to feel important. He's emptied himself of all of those things. When he goes to Egypt, he's a refugee in a foreign country. Now, I'm not going to get political, but anytime you want to get excited about Syrian refugees or other people that don't belong in our country, or however you think about that, remember, Jesus was an uninvited guest in somebody else's country. He was an invisible carpenter. He lived in a place that was colonized and occupied by an imperial power. He ended his life as a criminal. He was accused and tortured by two systems of power. He was abandoned by his inner circle. He was subjected to the most humiliating death. He was buried in an unmarked grave. He has stripped himself of anything to brag about. Yet we've largely made Jesus into a churchy icon that we could all be proud of. In Matthew 25, when Jesus says, "Whatever you did to the least of these, you did it unto me," Jesus was the least of these. He walked on this earth as the least of these. And we, his followers, are invited to get off of these notions that we're different or better because we're fishermen or tax collectors or Greeks, or we're not like them. The moment we realize that God doesn't care about any of our pride and any of our noise and any of our team logos, we start to get over ourselves. And the healthiest church in the world does not see itself as those who are at Blue Springs, or those who are at Raytown, or those who are of the worship center, or those who are of the sanctuary, or those who like Mike Scott, or those who like Jeff, or those who like Beth. But we look beyond all of the human feelings that we have about life and we see something bigger, something more important. We remember that we are the body of Christ. That's lots of different parts, different than me, doing important things. Every day, we have to decide whether we're going to argue about who's the most important, whether we're going to hold ourselves up and insist upon our way, or whether we're going to empty ourselves and try to love people instead. My wife is an auditor, and she goes to places sometimes, and she makes them unhappy because she has to say, "We're not like that. You're going to have to do it like this." And gosh, I remember how many years ago it was. She had been to a couple of sites up in Montana, and one of the gals at one of the sites sent an email to the gal at the other site describing my wife and her work in very unflattering terms. And my wife read it and cried, sobbed. And we talked about this. And I was so proud of her. Because it's human nature to hurt back. It's human nature to wound those who wound us. She wrote back, "Hi, hi. I'm pretty sure you didn't intend to include me in this email. And I want you to know I'm sorry if I have hurt you in any way. You know, sometimes my job makes people uncomfortable. This is how my job works, and I'm so sorry. I value you. I know about your families. I'm so sorry." And they all wrote back and said such very nice things. When we allow self to shine, it's ugly. But when we allow God to teach us to love one another, it's beautiful. It's amazing. I want to tell you a story about you that is one of the happiest things that I have ever heard. Earlier this year, I was talking to a school teacher who used to work on another side of town, had lots of fuss and fumings with parents and students and whatnot. And they came to this side of town, got a different job over here, and noticed a difference in how the teachers, how the parents behaved, and how a lot of the kids behaved, and some of the positive things that some of the parents said. And this teacher began to ask some of them, "There's something different at this school. What is it? There's something different in this side of town." And the common denominator that this teacher heard over and over again was, "I go to Woods Chapel Church." And we're not supposed to get puffed up, but I'm telling you what, never a prouder moment in my life than to know that you guys are doing it. It's not just an idea. It's not just a principle. You loving others can change the dynamic of your family. It can change the dynamic of your community. And indeed, it is the work of the kingdom that changes the very world. A new commandment I give to you. Love one another as I have loved you. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Now, if you think about that, that means if we're not loving one another, people have a right to say, "You go to church? Well, that surprises me. I see how you act. I see how you treat it. I don't want anything to do with that place." When we love other people, you don't even have to put a Woods Chapel bumper sticker on your car. They're going to go. You're awesome. How did you get like this? By this love, all will know that you are his followers. Beloved, let us love one another.